going to debug React.
I mean, I'd like to believe I'm not, but I just
I'm not excited for this at all, to be honest,
clue. So
because I've been stuck on this problem for a long time.
it's like I could spend my whole life
So
over
hopefully
weighing the pros and cons. I mean,
I get
I just don't debate it anymore.
engaged after some time.
It's absurd.
I already started stepping through the code here. So yeah,
It isn't everyone's.
what I'm trying to solve is the mounting cycle there when using a custom reconciler. So I just want to be able to finish this. I think I stopped into this part because here it looks like this queue has a set state thing on this dispatch, bound dispatch set state. And I think this is the first time that I saw this function. Maybe I stepped through it the other times and then didn't realize because it was going too fast. But I think that this is the function that is responsible for doing the effects on the components. So I wrote down here. So the way that it works on React, I think, is it puts the stuff on global variables, which are either stacks or queues, and then it pops them later on. So inside of this function here, and then it's gonna execute the stuff to update the components. So what I'm trying to understand is how can I mount this component using the custom reconciler. But here it looks like it doesn't mount, because if this was mounted, then I would have a custom pixie component, I think, on this here, this stuff that I'm rendering. So I think this would show up on the thing there, and it doesn't. Also, this other stuff would print. So I don't understand why this is happening, because I'm creating from this component, and this component is mounted on the app here. So this should create the link between the custom reconciler and the main renderer, which is React DOM. So I don't understand what's happening. The reason why I want to do this is because I want to solve the cycle here where the parent is being mounted before the child. So the parent amounts here inside the component will amount, and then this call here I think is supposed to amount the children that rely on the context of this class, but then it doesn't. So I think I'll probably put debugger here, and then I'll look into this after. I spent so much time already studying this that's very annoying to. It's not the kind of thing that I think is interesting. It's like more just stepping through this stuff. I want to finish this so I can continue to work on the stuff that is actually interesting. Just building the visualization. I think I'm not gonna spend a lot of time here as well. I'm just gonna do this stuff off stream, probably while I put a live stream on the side from someone else. Yeah, I think I'll try to stay at least 1 hour and a half.
Excuse me, brother. You said you were gonna arm me. And he says, excuse me, young I just did.
Blah blah. The thing is that is hard about this is that I don't know how to. Like this way is very. Like if I just step through the stuff, then at some point it just console logs everything. I think right after the effects are done. But it's very hard to visualize the connection between the cycle here on the work loop and the mounting and unmounting on the actual DOM. Because here is doing the updates on the virtual tree, virtual DOM. And then I think it swaps them at some point, but because like you're stepping through a bunch of these functions that are all connected to each other, it's hard to keep track of what is happening on the actual application, like on the higher level of the concepts. So the connection between what I have here, the components on the overall application, and what is happening here is tough because there's all these functions that end up being very repetitive as I'm stepping through them, because it's always the same stuff, but start to know like what breakpoints is gonna be like the major changes that happens on the thing, because most of this stuff is just like putting tasks on queues on global variables and then going through the work loop, which is the thing that is going to traverse the trees based on these objects here, which is the tree, and then it's gonna call these functions that are gonna perform the effect. The previous one is the different algorithm that it checks to see if the old props is equal to new props, and that's gonna be the stuff that is gonna decide whether or not it does the update. But then like to keep track of the conceptual level is very hard. Like how can I know how does it decide what order is gonna be? It's gonna update the components based on the context. That's the stuff that is difficult. I think is because it's part of one of these objects. I think like the object that had this dispatch state here, dispatch set state. This is gonna be the thing I think that determines the order, but yeah, I don't know. Yeah, that's the thing that is annoying. Then it goes over. I think the while loop there is just is the thing that determines not determines, but it goes on the loop until it traverses everything, and then it calls the same functions here for all the components. So it's kind of annoying. I can step over that, but then I'm not sure if I'm missing anything. So it just went through the app. Yeah, this should be the first one that goes through is the strict mode, which is the stuff that is wrapping everything. Now it goes down to the app, which is the child. I'm just gonna stop over because it's gonna be the same stuff. And now it's going to the children of the app. I need to find a better playlist. It's kind of hard to find playlists. I wish someone did a website that like allows you to select. I know that some people from Nights and Weekends did it, some stuff like this, but it's not like there's bugs. There was bugs and it didn't work very well. So yeah, it wouldn't need to be very complicated. But a website that allows you to select music based on the vibe, let's say. Because YouTube is good, but it's not very good. I can think about a bunch of different ways, but of how you can do that. Like, you could have a voting system or something like that for different types of vibes, and then train the algorithm to. Because I think that the challenge is that you shouldn't be. I think YouTube is only related to views and engagement, so it's not very good to. The machine learning model is probably not very good to find new music. So I think that there's a lot of playlists and music that nobody listens to because it has low view, but it would be very good. So it would be nice if someone did a website like that. And people can vote, let's say, on different types of vibes. So I guess that these functions are the ones like the begin work is the responsible. This is gonna be the diffing is comparing the prompts, which is the state of the current and the work in progress tree. So it's comparing the state of both trees and seeing if there are changes, and then this is probably a flag variable that determines if it's gonna call some function. Blah blah. And then it goes to the other one. Yeah, it's here. But I think, yeah. Or maybe I should just skip some of them. Yeah, so this one probably should look into. Fuck, maybe I skipped the only one that matter. Because I think that's here. But maybe not. I wanna see if one of them is gonna go over the did received update. It's gonna compare the props, it's gonna see that there was work done, and then see what's gonna happen, if anything is gonna happen. At this condition here, so now let's see if anything happens based on that. So the fiber stack is the thing that keeps track of the stuff that has to happen. It's a stack because it's a tree, probably. Like the DOM is a tree, so it makes sense to use a stack to update everything. So the fiber is the class that keeps the state of whatever is gonna be updated. So you have the root fiber, then you have the node fiber, which is the one that traverses, and you have the alternate, which is the alternate tree that creates. And then it uses the stack as it traverses in these loops. Just check if there is work to be done or not. And then if there is work to be done, it updates, pushes through the stack. Then probably at some point it's gonna start popping everything and then calling the callbacks from the objects inside of the stack, I think. So I think that, yeah, but there's still like the question of how does the context work? Because context is just an object, I think. So it translates the object through another object when it's parsing the JSX. And then based on the context object is gonna determine how does it updates everything. So I guess that's the part that I'm struggling with figuring out because it's very confusing. Well, at what point is it going to decide when it's gonna update the components based on the context? Because obviously the consumers of the context should be updated first. The other thing that I thought about is that I'm not using the context.consumer to wrap the components, so this might be the issue. Because there might be a link there that it creates and you have to put the context.consumer. But I'm not really sure. Because I know that it works if you wrap the components based from the provider, you wrap use the context provider to wrap the components that you're gonna use the context, and then it works usually, but it might be in this case necessary. I think that there's also the stuff on the documentation that says that you have to use a context bridge if you're using a custom renderer, because React doesn't allow you to pass context from the main renderer to the custom one. But the one that I'm using there is all inside of the same custom renderer, I think. So it should update the state of all of them. But I'm definitely missing something when I step over this stuff. It's hard to know like at what point exactly it's gonna handle that because of all these repetitive functions that it's calling. So I just want to step through them fast. But then I end up missing the points where it's gonna decide how it's gonna update the components based on the context. So we reached the bottom of the tree.
bitches.
I think this is the diffing algorithm. The first comparison is just to see if it's gonna run this stuff or not, I think. This one actually does the updates probably. It just returns the update payload.
Who's gonna call the bitches? Who's gonna call?
Yeah, but it didn't go here.
Bitches.
That's the thing. So I guess like this loop is from the main reconciler, from the main renderer. But I think pretty sure I started this stuff when I was stepping over the call here. Stepping over this. Hmm.
Nothing is wrong with you. may try to make you feel guilty. But guilt can only truly come from within. Nothing is wrong with you. Accept the situation and move on. Regret has two sides. The things we do and the things we wish we had done.
So this condition checks to see if it's a context provider. It's passing the component. So this thing here is probably the thing responsible for the order of updates on the context. And it is different from class component to functional component. Maybe the thing is, I don't think I can simplify. Actually, I actually can. I think. Just gonna delete this stuff here that is irrelevant. Ways less stuff should step through. Let me see if there's anything else that I can remove. Yeah, let me think.
You cannot get out of this.
Trying to make it as simple as possible so I can just see what's important there. Maybe I should do like another, or yeah, create a. Not sure if I have a Git. I think it initializes a Git repository when you run create React app. So maybe I should do another branch and then just delete everything and just put like one component with a context. But I think that this is probably the simplest. But maybe I should do another variation just to see the stuff that matters, which is the context and how it's gonna determine. The thing is, I need like somewhat a more complex structure because I want to see. Like I would have to put the context on the parent, for example, and then put the child, or create another component as a child or as a sibling of the one that has a context. The thing is, I need, because what I want to see is how the context is updated what is the difference between the update on the normal renderer, which is the React DOM renderer, and on the custom renderer? So I think that's the stuff that matters to me the most. So they have to create a context on the parent, and then I would need. Yeah, I think this is the simplest I can do it probably. That's the main thing that I wanna understand. So the question is, why doesn't it create the? Maybe I can put another component. Yeah, but the thing is, like, that's the problem I think from last time. That if I put a normal div here, I think it's not gonna work because of the way that this reconciler is set up. Like all the functions here, I think these functions are created for components that are gonna exist inside of a canvas, that are gonna be part of Pixie. I think that's the problem. So there isn't any easy way, unless I find a more simple reconciler and then I create another reconciler, just so I can put a div here to see if the problem is this custom component or not. Because I remember I was having problems with this as well. So the issue is that the reconciler is gonna create based on these functions here, on the custom functions on the host config. I think I'll be right back. So it looks like this bubble properties just changes the lanes based on the children. So it's changing the completed work. And what is completed work? Is the fiber node. So just changing the properties of the fiber nodes. Like the first iteration, it goes to the bottom, marking everything to update, and then once it gets to the bottom, it starts going up again to do this complete work and change the values on the fiber node.
This is just the beginning. This is not the end. This is just the beginning.
Yeah, now that we finished all the work, it's gonna commit everything. At least I think I got the high level down now. It's not difficult to understand, it's just annoying. But I still don't. I'm still confused about the order. I think that the reason why it's difficult is because it's using flag variables to determine. Uses not flag variables, global variables. Uses global variables to create the queues and stack, and then it creates callbacks inside of those queues and stack. So as I'm stepping through this stuff here, it's hard to keep track of what tasks is appending and removing from both the fiber stack and the update queue and the stuff like that. So it's hard to think about. Maybe what I should do is just write down next time that I'm stepping over this. Every time that there is a call to, or it's appending something to stack, I should keep track of the stuff that is appending to determine what's gonna be the order of the updates. Oh, that's the other stuff that like I'm so far I'm ignoring the lanes because it's another thing that is very confusing because it uses all these bitwise operations and then like as it's going over all of those functions it's gonna do the bitwise operations and it's gonna change the lanes. So that's another stuff that changes the order of the updates, I think. But it's hard to understand what exactly, like how is determining the order based on the lanes. This one is kind of interesting. So it's using these mounted routes to keep track of the renderers. Inject them. What the fuck is this? I'm not sure if the... well, it should actually. I was gonna say that I'm not sure if the lanes change the order or just the priority of the updates. But I think it does because it's related, obviously, so... depending on the priority, it might change the order. But maybe it decides the priority and doesn't change the order because the order happens on the commit phase? Not sure. Here we go again. I think this time we're just gonna go like this.
I have spent my whole life scared, frightened of things that could happen, might not happen. Now, say my name.
think at this point is just the React part is over, so it's probably something, some functions related to the event loop on the engine to wait until there's more work to do. So it is not related to, obviously it is related, but it's not directly related to React.
This is not the end.
It's just related to the connection. Now it's re-rendering everything.
This is not the end.
I think I'm gonna restart everything and just put, I'm gonna remove the other debugger breakpoint and just start from this one.
This is not the end.
Maybe I should put the breakpoint before,
This is just the beginning.
just see. But I'm pretty sure it is gonna be a fiber root node when you use this function here. But I have to see, I think, if it is, how it's gonna connect the element with the root, and I think it's through the update payload. It creates an object that has an element as a value, and that element is gonna be the component. But then I don't know how it's gonna use that to update the children, or to put the stuff on the DOM. I think that's what I'm missing. Yeah, this is the result there of the create container call. And the container info is the element converted into JSX. But it, like, the thing is that this should be mounted on the main thing, I think.
This is just the beginning.
It could be because it's two different references though, that's the thing. Because obviously I can reuse the same component on both, on different parts, so I think what's happening is that it's creating another component, so everything works, but then it doesn't have a link between the custom reconciler, the custom React reconciler, which is the fiber, Pixie fiber, and the React DOM. reconciler. So like even though I'm using the component here, is not the same as this one. That's the problem, I think. So the question is how to create the link, and if on all the examples I saw, they always pass no here. So the only one that doesn't is the one from React Pixie, but then it creates this stuff inside of the class, and I don't know how to, because it needs to have the property of React something. I'm not sure if I wrote down. So the question is how to create the link between the custom one and the React DOM one. And this part is the one that fucks up if you put the parent, because it's gonna try to get it, but it doesn't have the property. Yeah, React internals. The class, if you pass these keywords inside of the class, then it does have this property here. But if I just pass the normal element, it's not gonna have this property. So like it has to be something that is mounted in the thing, I think, on the tree. But how do you get the reference for that? As I'm calling here, that's the question. So for example, if I want to mount on the app or on the wrapper component, how would I pass the reference to that inside of here? Because I think it's gonna be the same issue. If I just pass the component, it's not gonna work, because it's gonna be a different instance, and then it's not gonna have React internals because it's not part of the tree yet. So I think it creates this property once it's updating the components. So after it creates the fiber node and fiber root node, and it starts doing the work loop, it's gonna at some point add this property to the component, I think. So and this is the part that is gonna associate the thing with the element. The element is a component. The update payload is an object that is gonna determine when it's gonna update things, I think. Or determine what's gonna update. React provider, React context. This is the thing here, the context here. And this is gonna associate, I think, the fiber root nodes, the enqueue update property, or the update queue property of the fiber root nodes with the payload here, the update payload, I think. Maybe I should go over again. Yeah, update queue, and shared queue. So the first time it doesn't do anything because it doesn't pass this condition. And then creates a circular list, and this is the stuff that keeps track, I think, of the updates. So concurrent queues. blah blah. And this is gonna create the task inside of the function from schedule callback, and it's gonna append at some point the task with the callback inside, which is the perform work on root, I think. So sync queue is the another step that is gonna keep track of the tasks, I think. Yeah, bound perform sync work on root. And then later on, once it finishes everything, then it's gonna pop this at some point, and then it's gonna do the callback. I think inside of the work loop, it's gonna do that. It's back to the main update container call. Sure, blah blah blah. And this was, I guess that's the stuff that is confusing, because now it's outside, so it's done with this function, so it just scheduled everything, but it didn't do like the work yet. So I guess it's gonna do it once it renders the component, like on the return statement maybe of the function. So now it's setting up the callback, I think, for when it's gonna update, remove the component from the tree, because it reaches the return statement of the use effect hook. And this effect probably has it is an object that has the functions that is going to determine what's going to happen when the component mounts and unmounts, I think. So create and destroy. And destroy is the function that you pass there instead of the use effect. So now it's traversing to the root. Recess the fiber. So I guess this loop here is checking to see if there are any side effects from the the fact that it just went through, I think. Because it's checking to see if there's a sibling and then it's going traversing to the parents. This next effect. The next, I'm not really sure what it is. I guess it's just the fiber nodes of the trees, and then they are connected through the properties there. Next effect. And next effect is just gonna be the parent fiber node. So checking to see it's going up until it gets to the root. And then checking to see if there are other effects. So I guess it depends on this condition here. Just see if it's gonna do anything. Here is the part that is gonna mount probably. And then the cost component will mount. Interesting. Well, why is it doing that in this wrapper component? Because it should reach the bottom there, I think. As it's looping over the child. It should only stop when the child is null, which would be the last element. To understand why it stopped on the wrapper component. Like here. Now this is the part that's it's kind of weird because it's going to the child and then it stopped into the wrapper component. Maybe it's because the wrapper component is the last one from the main renderer, but I have no idea. Because it's supposed to be inside of this element is still it's supposed to be inside of here. As far as I remember, the last time that it went on React stuff was when it reaches this point, and then it creates the object there for the effect, and it didn't go outside of this again. So it should have stopped here, but I guess that happens after. Yeah, so the sequence was it created the updates here, and then it created the effects here, and after it created the effects, then you went through these functions that I'm going over now, and then inside of these functions it called this component will mount from the class component inside of this loop here. So it's supposed to get to the bottom of the tree, and then once it does, it's gonna call the invoke effect. And it did that for this component here, so it means that this component is at the bottom, but I don't understand why though, if it is supposed to be inside of here still. The current is gonna be apparently. Oh, it's confusing. This is gonna call this stuff not when the current is not null, so just when this condition is false. The current child is null. So it's one before the bottom. It's gonna call this stuff. I think it makes sense because obviously the child, if the child is null, then it means that you reach the bottom because it's like unmounting everything. So at each iteration, the current component is going to become null, and then on the next one is going to be the child's going to be null. So I think that makes sense. This is the effect. So the effect is based on the update queue, which is the value on the fiber root node, I think, or the fiber node. Yeah, fiber node has the update queue, and this is the value that was set up there in the beginning. Like when it's creating the tasks, I think it makes it changes this value. Oh fuck. Safety construct. So it's passing the function from the thing, which means it's calling the function that is gonna happen here. Yeah, destroy. Safely call destroy. Destroy is gonna be the function that it creates from the effects. So it's gonna call the function here, which is gonna be whatever is gonna happen inside of this function. So it calls here, and it is this function here. And this calls dispatch set state. That's because I'm changing the state there, so it makes sense. So dispatch set state is associated with the use state hook, I think. So whenever you call set state, it's gonna be. I haven't looked into the source code of use state. I have should see that later, but I think it's not that important now for the stuff that I'm trying to understand. But I think I get it. Like when he calls this, it's gonna call the dispatch set state because this function is probably created somewhere along this one. Yeah, dispatch set state is probably the internal implementation in React. There's something inside of a use state that uses dispatch set state, and that's the thing that is going to be called every time you change the state of the variable there, I think. So it calls this function and creates these updates. I skipped everything. And then it's gonna schedule the updates. So it's probably gonna append the task there to the queue. Yeah, then it's gonna call this and it's gonna do the same thing that it did in the beginning. Any links are being starved by other work. This is the function that was set up in the beginning, I think. Yeah, that's the thing though, that like it went through the cycle and it didn't do anything with the main component. I think it's because it's missing the link here, so like I have to think about how I'm gonna solve this stuff. I'm assuming that's the case because that's the only thing that makes sense to me now, but it might be something different. But I think that once he creates this is going to be a fiber root node after he calls this, and it's going to be the element on the update queue. I think is going to be this component, but this one is not the same component as this one. Just two different references. So when you call update container here, it creates the tree from this fiber root node, which is the one that I'm passing here, and like it mounts everything with this component, does everything, but the issue is that this component is not connected with the main tree, so it doesn't show up there on the application, because it's like, even though it's rendering both of them, there's no connection, so it doesn't update the DOM. I think that's what's happening, but not 100% sure. So I wonder what would be a good place to set up another breakpoint, so I don't have to step through all of this stuff. Because the problem is, if I put it on the wrong place, I'm gonna miss some functions that might be important to understand.
Panic and just spat out the first thing that comes to my mind. What's up? It has been a marvelous night. I enjoyed it.
Yeah, inside of the update queue, base state element is the element that is gonna be, like, that's the connection between the JSX and the fiber. And then based on that, it's gonna create these queues, sync and concurrent. And then based on those, it's gonna decide when it's gonna update what. This same loop that happened before, where it's gonna call the stuff here and run through the effects. So it's gonna call component did mounts. Like, the obvious solution is to do something else here instead of the component will mount, and then, like, I can manually remove, like, there's several things I think I could do to just solve the thing, but it feels like it is the wrong approach to take, because then, like, the loop itself is still fucked up, and then every time you have to put a different class or change something else, you're gonna have to manually figure out how to destroy. So for example, here, like, at this point here, or after I call this, I could call the function on I could import the Pixie view part that I'm creating on the custom component here. I'm not even sure if that would work, because I'm not sure about the reference. I guess I could export this component maybe, and then, like, do something here inside that unmounts this, but even if that would work, I think is a shitty approach, I think. So I think that the issue is on this call here. That's the problem. I think this call should be unmounting the component, but it isn't. So it's probably an issue with the documentation, because I think that inside of this, the thing is that update container is just gonna mark everything for updates. It's gonna set up the callbacks based on the queues here, and then at some other point it's gonna pop the tasks, and then it's gonna do the callback, which is gonna call the perform work on root, and then on those parts is gonna decide, like, how it updates the components. So at that point, I think is the problem, that is probably calling some I think that the function that it's calling is remove child, as far as I remember, and then it's calling from the configuration of the host. So it might be the case that there's a mistake here on this side of this function, but, like, maybe this is the problem with React as well. So I think the correct approach is to try to change this function here. But I'm still very, like, kind of confused about the sequence of the way that things happen. I think I'm gonna spend more time trying to, like, until it becomes really clear. But every time that I'm looking into this, it is becoming more and more clear. Like now I don't have to, like, because I have all the functions in my mind and I know roughly like the sequence of events that is gonna take place. It's much easier to think about now when I'm looking at these functions, because I have a decent idea of what's gonna happen during the whole process. So I think I just need to step through this a couple of more times and like continue to write down the stuff here until I understand at what points exactly it's gonna unmount and mount the components, and how is this. Maybe I should step through this one now, I think, because this one is the one that is gonna make the connection between the custom reconciler and the normal one, and it does that by using the this keyword inside of the components. The component did an update here, so it creates the container based on the stage, and then it passes the parent, which is gonna be this class. And then I think the reason why this one works is because of this. It's able to pass the parent component here, and this is the thing that creates the link between this class and because this class is going to be mounted on the main application, on the main React DOM render. So because it passes this here, it's going to create the link between the custom reconciler and the main one, and that's what makes this show up on the DOM. But the one that I have there, it doesn't create a link because I can't pass this as a parent, because this is undefined inside of the functional component. And also, just by creating the container, which is going to be the fiber root node, it doesn't matter because this is not a part of the application. So, like, and I think it decides in the very beginning what stuff is going to be rendered. I guess one hacky way would be to call the React DOM render again. Maybe that changes something. I think that's an interesting thing to see, what would happen. If right after I do the call here, I just call the React DOM render again. Like, after I do this, I call and then I render this stuff, or render the mount node. Yeah, but I'm not sure. Actually, I would have to pass the wrapper component. Yeah, but so I could call this again. Or I could create, but then it defeats the point of using the custom reconciler, obviously, but just to see, because I think that this is the stuff that determines what's going to be rendered in the DOM. So whatever you want to show up on the application has to be connected through this, because this is the main thing. Under the hood, React is updating the actual DOM based on whatever happens on this one. And then if you use the custom reconciler, it's not going to put that stuff on the DOM by default, because the main application is done through this stuff here, I think. So obviously, like, you could, yeah, because this is the thing, you could create the DOM just with a custom reconciler. You wouldn't need the React DOM, but then I think that there's something that happens under the hood in the very beginning that makes this one to be the official one, let's say. There's gonna determine what's gonna happen on the DOM. I think it's the connection between the port message there, the way that sets up everything on it sets up the React server and the application. I think that's where, at the point where it decides that it's gonna use this as the main node for the application. But I guess you could just call create root instead of create container as well, and maybe that would work. Not sure what would happen actually, because how would it, I guess you could do that if I, instead of calling create container, I call create root, then yeah, but the question is how would that be connected with the components that already exist. I guess I could get by ID So I could use document get element by ID. So maybe I should do that, or I should use ref as well. Maybe I can use forward ref, and then I pass the ref here. So this component, and then instead of using this one, I use the ref. Maybe that if I do that, it's gonna work. Because obviously that way would be. I think that this probably is the solution. If I do that, so instead of making this should be a normal component, I just do a forward ref. Maybe I'll do a forward ref on the wrapper component. That would allow me to create a ref here, and then I use ref here. I think that's the solution probably. Use ref from React. Then make null here, and then ref equals wrapper. So I would do it like this, and then instead of making this a class, I make it a forward ref component, and then inside of then I just get the ref from here. I think just access the ref. Yeah, I would have to pass, because then it obviously wouldn't be this stuff here. I would just render, or just return. And then I would return the children and pass the ref to the children. Or I don't even need to, because I can just render the parent directly, and then through the parent I pass the ref as props, and then here I would get the ref and put here. So get the ref here. And then I would put this stuff here. I think that's what I'm gonna try to do. Because that way I can create a link between the custom one and the main one. But I still wanna step over a couple of more times, maybe on this, on the other application as well, so I understand more. So make sure that I understand at what points. I'm curious about the null now, this call here, like how it's gonna be different. And I wanna know, I wanna check the exact point that it deletes the components from the tree. Yeah, I think I'm gonna stop here, and I'm gonna step over these more times off stream, and then I'm gonna try to change this stuff. Just do what I just said, make the forward ref and then pass the ref here instead of the component. And see if it's gonna at least render something. So probably gonna come back tomorrow or some other time, and I'm gonna continue to do this stuff until I solve this, and then work on the graphics, and then potentially go back to the tiny grad stuff to try to merge the two things. Like once I get to the point where I'm trying to build a compiler or interpreter to create the graph out of code, then I think it's going to be interesting to go back, because I think that the ONNX library that I saw, I think it's very similar to, it's not the same obviously, but it's similar to the stuff that I'm trying to do. So I think it would be interesting to study the library, maybe try to do something with the library, so I understand how they did it and how it works. So yeah, but probably gonna come back tomorrow or some other time, so see you then.